Okay, welcome back to History Tea with Professor T. So, part four of four of chapter 19. So, we're going to talk about Woodrow Wilson, we'll talk about Theodore Roosevelt and race. So, we'll start with Theodore Roosevelt. So, Theodore Roosevelt will invite Booker T. Washington to the White House. And when he does this, the nation loses it, especially Southerners. This idea that you'll have this black man who is within, feet of Theodore Roosevelt's daughter. The idea that you have this black man who would dine with the president and his family. So especially Southerners lose it because at this time there is this narrative of black criminality, of black male hypersexuality, this idea that black men have this insatiable desire for white women and that they will rape white women. And it's this narrative that is carried on through the 20th century and that will cause the deaths of many black men through lynching. And so if we go back a couple of chapters and I talked about Ida B. Wells, Ida B. Wells will write about this phenomenon and she'll write about lynching and she'll talk about how a lot of black men are being lynched for being accused of raping white women, and they're lies. They're not raping white women, but it's because of this mythology of black criminality, of black hypersexuality that has been perpetuated since really since emancipation, through the convict leasing system and black codes where black men could be arrested really for anything, and the idea is that they're inherently criminal and this is why they're being arrested. So it leads to this myth of hypersexuality, and black male criminality. Theodore Roosevelt, again, will invite Booker T. Washington, and he is one of the, I would call him a leader of black social and black, I would say, socio-political and economic growth. He is one of the early theorists and early leaders of black America. Booker T. Washington has an altogether different idea of how black people should advance in American society than his counterpart, W.E.B. Du Bois, which we'll talk about shortly. Booker T. Washington believes that the way that Black people, the road to success is really through economic autonomy and through being able to build with your hands. Since the majority of Black people at this time still lived in the South, a number of them were farmers and sharecroppers. He felt that it was best that Black people have a technical education that would teach you these skills about better crop rotation and that would produce Black nurses and Black teachers and things of this nature. So, technical education. Theodore Roosevelt invites Booker T. Washington to the White House. And so you would think that this means that he believes they are equal, but no. Theodore Roosevelt is quoted as saying that he felt that blacks were wholly unfit for the suffrage. So even though he invites Booker T. Washington to the White House, he doesn't think that black people have the wherewithal to be able to vote and participate in their own political futures, political and social futures. Woodrow Wilson will impose racial segregation in many federal departments, and he will even allow D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation to be screened in the White House. So, uh, Birth of a Nation was, I would say, one of the first, I would say, major motion picture films to be produced in 1915. Follow up on that year, I want to say 1915, but I could be wrong. In 1915, D.W. Griffith, bases Birth of a Nation off of a book called The Klansman. And in this book, it tells the story really of the lost cause. It gives this lost cause narrative of the Old South, where instead of seeing Reconstruction as an era where African Americans are given some level of political autonomy and where they rise from slavery to holding office, instead, Reconstruction is seen as this unfortunate period of Black rule where Black people are seen as savages, they are seen as being wholly unfit for the positions in which they occupy, they are seen as criminals, they are seen as violent, and they are seen, Black men in particular, are seen as rapists. The crux of the conflict comes that after the Civil War ends, during Reconstruction, Black people are in office. I would say the climax of the movie comes when a young woman is running for her life from a Black man who is trying to rape her. And in an effort to not be raped, she throws herself off of a cliff, thus killing herself. And so uh, our nation's, or one of our nation's first terrorist organizations, the Ku Klux Klan, must race in and save the day. So the Klan is seen as a saving, redeeming source. They are seen as these saviors who come to rescue the South from this unfortunate period of Negro rule. This is an incredibly racist movie. It's about 3 hours long. It is available on YouTube. So if you want to watch it, it is a 3 hour long silent film. So you will have to read a little bit and just see everything that's going on. This movie was known for its special effects at the time because you didn't really see a lot of special effects in movies. And so people love to see this movie. However, it spread this false and very damaging narrative that is filled with Black stereotypes. Woodrow Wilson will allow this to be screened in the White House. He will talk about how brilliant he feels this movie is, that it's history written with lightning. So, um, that was Roosevelt, Wilson, and race. So you get to kind of see how each of them feel about race and the race problem. So enters W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois is very different from Booker T. Washington. Yes, both of them are thought leaders, but you see a lot of differences. Booker T. Washington was born into slavery in the South. W.E.B. Du Bois is not born into slavery. He is born in Massachusetts in the North, and he is born in 1868, 3 years after the emancipation of slavery, or the emancipation of slaves, the abolition, I would say, of slavery. He will get his education at Fisk. Fisk is a historically Black college or university, are also known as an HBCU. Most HBCUs are in the South because they have a purpose of educating Black people, since Black people could not attend mainstream universities. He is also educated at Harvard University. He gets a PhD from Harvard. In 1903, he writes a book called The Souls of Black Folk. Du Bois really believes that the best way for African Americans to advance is to get a classical education. And he really believes that the what he calls the talented 10th, that the educated, those African Americans who were educated, who were the top of the line, the best of the best, he believed that they should use their education for uplift. Du Bois ends up creating or helping to create the NAACP. The NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, or as it is colloquially known, the NAACP. I like to bring up Du Bois because you will be reading a piece that he wrote that encourages African Americans to become involved in the war effort. But after the war is over, he writes another piece where his tune has changed quite a bit. And so I want you guys to read both of those and kind of juxtapose those. So there's a huge race problem. One thing that Du Bois says that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line, racism. Racism is a huge issue, he states. And because of this enormous racism that African Americans and discrimination that they are facing in the South, you will see this large scale migration of Black people from the South to the North. This is known as the Great Migration. So, why are African Americans moving? They are moving to escape a lot of the brutality, discrimination, and racism that is in the South. And they're also moving because the industrial jobs are in the North. And once World War One begins, these industrial jobs will open their doors to African American laborers. So, because of this, you will get a lot of Black people who will move from the South to the North. And the population of Blacks in the North will drastically increase. Between 1910 and 1930, the Northern Black population will rise by nearly 40%. So, what are they leaving in the South? In the South, their workforce is leaving, they're escaping Jim Crow. But in the North, there's no place to go. There's still discrimination in the North. You can't escape a lot of this discrimination. And so in the North, you get the creation of a lot of ghettos. And we'll discuss that as we continue, especially once we get to World War II, the Great Depression, but we'll discuss that soon. It's also during this period, because it's a period of coercive patriotism, that we have the Red Scare. And that is fueled by the fear of communism. So from November 1919 till about January 1920, we have Palmer raids. And so in June 1919, the home of General A. Mitchell Palmer was bombed. He was the Attorney General. A. Mitchell Palmer will dispatch federal agents to raid the houses, or in response to this, he'll send federal agents to raid the homes of suspected radical organizations, suspected labor organizations. And these raids are overseen by, J. Edgar Hoover. So you see a lot of fear of communism. And when there's a fear of communism, you see a lot of people's, I would say, rights at this time being um, definitely being impacted, right? Okay, so we will go on and finish part 4 with Armistice Day. So, November 11th, 1918, the Allied powers will sign a ceasefire with Germany, which will end World War One. The first Armistice Day celebration in the US will be in 1919. What officially ends the war is with the signing of the Versailles Treaty. And this is really important because it sets up, or it gives you a lot of the context of, I'll say, the development of Nazi Germany. So, the Versailles Treaty, some of the good things, it establishes the League of Nations. It says that all Eastern European nations should have self determination. All of that is very good. Now, why I say the Versailles Treaty really gives context to Nazi Germany is because under the terms of the Versailles Treaty, the size of Germany's army is pretty limited. Also, Germany is forced to claim moral responsibility for the war, and they also have to pay back reparations. So, not only will the German economy be pretty crippled, uh, the German economy will be crippled. I will say German infrastructure from war will be crippled, and I'll say their morale is crippled. They are forced to accept or claim responsibility for this war. They are forced to say the war was our fault and we're going to pay you because of it. And so when you get into Nazi Germany, you're wondering, How is a Hitler? How was a Hitler able to rise through the ranks? Remember that you're looking at a economically and morally defeated Germany. And so when you have someone who is coming up and saying you should have pride in your fatherland, you're looking at people who are defeated. And so this is going to sound quite good. So I always think that's very important to say, just to add some context. All right, you guys, that completes chapter 19. I'll see you in a bit for chapter 20.